Well, you're gonna go into Dave once
Okay,
you're gonna go into Dave once he's answering a question.
I'm rolling right now, so you just
Okay, then you want me to?
I'm rolling now.
Did you want to?
4, 3.
Excuse me. Did you want to lead with the American Rockabilly thing, or did you have an order that matters to you?
Dave, I know that one of your passions is American rockabilly. How did you become interested in it, or anything like that?
All right.
It's rockabilly. In other words, going
But then
back,
we'll go from there then to his early influences and why guitar and
and then up to
all
today.
that. Okay.
Okay, quiet, please.
And then after each question, I'm going to zoom back out and put the two of them in.
Yes.
Okay.
You can tilt down a little. I don't need the guitar that much. Good. Good, good, good. Now, a slate.
You sliced it already. All right.
This is shot number 1. It's Jim introing Dave. And I'll do this. 4, 3.
Dave, you're known throughout the world as an authority on rockabilly, yet you're a musician from Wales. How did you get interested in American rockabilly?
Well, I guess it was when I was in school, when I was 13 or 14, and the only radio station we had was BBC, and they didn't play much of that. But there was, Radio Luxembourg used to come on in the evenings, and they'd play all the American rock and roll stuff, and that was it, really. That got me.
Who did you hear then?
Oh, it was just all the stuff that was eventually got in the charts then. The Gene Vincent, Everly Brothers, Jerry Lee Lewis, Fats Domino, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry.
Was it the sound of the guitar that struck you, or was it just the intensity?
The whole sound of the record. It was like as if they'd come from Mars or something, because you just had all this normal music before that, sort of Johnny Ray and Patti Page and all of a sudden this sound, it just captured me completely.
Was the importance of vocals as strong as the importance of the instrumental sound?
I don't think I could pick and choose. It was just the whole sound and the slap echo and and the vocal and the guitars. It was the whole thing. But there was a guitar kicking around the house, and I eventually sort of graduated towards that and became interested in guitar.
How old were you at that time?
I must have been 12 or 13.
Did you take lessons?
No.
Just listen to the radio?
Yeah,
and
figured it all out,
books?
yes. I mean, I don't think there were even any guitar books around then. There may have been, but I wasn't aware of them. And I just actually worked it out.
How many other guitar players were there in your town then, about that same time, you think?
Well, yeah, so I suppose it started happening all around the country at that time. Myself and I felt as if I discovered it for myself, but obviously other guys were doing exactly the same. Great.
Did you feel at all isolated from the other youth, or did you feel part of a sort of an avant-garde movement?
Yes, I suppose so, because all the other kids in school, they were just into sports or whatever, and I was just, all I could think about was rock and roll. Then eventually you meet someone else, and you put a band together, and that's how it started, and start playing around your hometown. That's what I did.
What was it about, specifically about the guitar, that made you want to gravitate to that instead, say, of the bass or drums, or even, trumpet and saxophone?
I think it was Chet Atkins. I discovered, again, I felt I discovered Chet Atkins myself, because that style of guitar playing, when he's accompanying himself, that absolutely fascinated me. I could not believe that someone could do that. So I was slowing down the records to half speed and learning all the licks. And then I realized Scotty Moore was doing a similar sort of thing with Elvis Presley. And the whole thing just became totally fascinating for me.
Do you remember when you first saw American rock and roll bands abroad?
I couldn't think of an answer anyway.
That was a good one.
I tried to We're still rolling.
Now let it go. The last question was why a guitar?
No, do you remember who you first saw? What I was thinking about is the difference between the impact of hearing the music on radio and record versus the impact of seeing somebody up on stage and hearing things live.
Back to the two-shot.
All right.
And you can ask the same question.
All right.
All right, stand
Is
by.
that a good? Okay.
Want to say?
This is a pickup, shot 1. Code number going down?
Yeah.
Do you recall who you first saw live? I mean, was there a difference between hearing rock and roll guitar on record and on radio as opposed to seeing somebody standing up there in front of you?
Well, in those days, they used to do package tours, as they were called, and you'd have sort of 10 or 12 acts on, and they'd do 2 or 3 songs each. I saw Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran. They came to my hometown, and that was just amazing.
On the same
In fact, I
bill?
was backstage and sitting in the wings looking and all that. Oh, it was great.
Was it a different feeling for you, the impact?
Well, it took it even further, just the whole thing, the stage lights, you know, rock and roll on stage, the audience going crazy. It was all part and parcel of...
Now, somehow you've managed to take blues influences, rock and roll influences, country influences, and put them all together into music that has been uniquely Dave Edmunds. Do you have a feeling about what the relationship is between these things? They're essentially rather diverse musical styles.
I suppose it is, but I didn't know that they were at the time. It was just my ignorance of it. I just thought it was just all fascinating, and I couldn't see any reason why not, and just fuse them all together. Probably if I'd have known more about it, I wouldn't have done it, but just in my youthful innocence, I just put them all into one category and got to learn to play it.
Well, you've seen a lot of guitarists over the years. You've produced many successful bands, from Foghat, Brinsley Schwartz, and certainly the Stray Cats. As a producer, what do you look for in a guitar sound? What do you look for in a guitar performer?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Guitar sounds. It's not always easy. It's not the easiest instrument to record with amplifiers. Anyway, that's why very often I plug straight into the desk. But it's quite hard, and Brian Setzer's got it down, actually. He gets a great sound in the studio. We would try to get a sound that's not distorted, but still punchy and a big sound. That's quite hard to achieve. But Brian seems to do it, you know, with his choice, the way he plays, I think, his choice of guitar and amplifier. It works very well.
Who are some of the guitar players today that have struck your fancy? Who do you think we're going to be listening to? Or what type of players?
Oh, there are many fine players. It's amazing. There's so many out there.
Well, as the reigning authority on rockabilly, who do you think has got it covered?
For rockabilly, it's got to be Brian Setzer. Streets ahead of anyone else. And he's made it popular as well. Not just playing it, and there are a lot of purist rockabilly bands around, but to actually get it up there in the charts and get everyone listening to it, it's got to be Brian Setzer.
Now, it seems to me that's an excellent place for you to go to the...
Brian Setzer.
That's a stop, too.
5, 4, 3.
Tilt up a wee bit more.
Spin.
Okay, come right ahead. All right, Wolf, that's good.
Oh God, is that honking?
Hold on, man.
Can you believe this on a Sunday night? What is going on out there?
Okay. 4, 3.
This is pickup 2A, Scotty Moore. You copied this, don't you, Ron? You can hear me. And in 4, 3.
You got horns like crazy.
Oh, Ron will stop us if it's a problem.
In the bands of that time, the early rock and roll bands, of course there were drummers, but you didn't take up drums. And there were bass players, and you didn't take up bass. Why, what was it about the guitar?
Guitar was my instrument. I think it was Chet Atkins. He had he invented, more or less, a fascinating style of accompanying himself, which, oh good, he didn't invent it.
Can I ask?
And this is take 2 of 2A, Scotty Moore. In 4, 3.
Dave, in those early bands, there was, of course, a drummer, but yet you didn't take up drums, and bass players, and you didn't take up bass. Well, why the guitar?
No, guitar was the one for me. I think Chet Atkins, his style just fascinated me, where he could accompany himself with his thumb. And it's a really fascinating style of music. I used to buy all his albums and slow them down half speed, learn all the riffs. And, wonderful. Scotty Moore used the same technique as well with Elvis. I think probably because there are only 3 of them, and he had to fill out the sound somehow. So he was accompanying himself. And that style of guitar playing, I have to say, is my favourite of all.
Well, people like Scotty didn't have anyone to emulate as today's players do. They were making it up from day one.
I think maybe he got some of it from Merle Travis and Chet Atkins. But he played beautifully on and the sound he used to get on those early Elvis records. I don't know why, but I've never heard that sound since on record. It was just a wonderful sound he used to get.
Were there other players that struck you that much? In those
yes,
days?
James Burton, especially.
And James went on to do replace Scotty later on.
Yes,
and played
that's
with
right.
Elvis for years.
Yes, I think one of the classic rock and roll guitar solos of all time has got to be Hello, Mary Lou. That is just wonderful.
What about people like Buddy Holly, Carl Perkins?
Yes.
those
Sonny
guys?
Curtis as well. Did some good stuff.
Did you get to hear those people? Were many young players in Britain listening to players like that very often, or was it just sort of a few radicals?
I think it was,
out there?
actually. I sort of like to think so in a way, because then the Shadows came out in England and everyone was trying to play like Hank Marvin. I don't know if you're aware of his...
Oh,
thing.
sure.
Yes, it's kind of a little... it feels like, you know, you belong to a club or something.
In a way, was the guitar a bit of a symbol for that youthful rebellion among you guys?
I suppose so. It's strange, a guitar. I can't think of any other instrument that is such as an extension of the personality. Like a piano isn't. You can get nice pianos, and synthesizers certainly don't have that quality. There's something about guitars that it's just fascinating.
Good.
Okay.
Got it.
Perfect.
Got it.
I really never know what that's going to be. Where's the slate? Thanks.
Now what shot is this? 3? Okay, stand by. Everyone settle down. Come right a little bit, Ron.
Alright, this is just so we know that it was the beginning of the shot.
Well, I'm doing it, I guess, and I'm sitting here.
Right, we have speed whenever you're ready.
And this is shot 3 about Chuck Berry. Take 1. In 5, 4, 3. Quiet. Excuse me. Quiet, please! And go.
You're advertising Heineken there.
Oh,
No,
no,
they're
it's
not showing me. I'm
single
sorry. Okay.
You'll have to engage the camera.
Yes. Oh, we're not just talking.
Oh no, this is
We're
a
just-
solo.
Just an intro.
Well,
What do you want me to say?
That's if you on the camera.
Well, maybe it should be over there.
Yes, yeah. Put it right there, great.
Well, why don't you simply have Jim ask him about Chuck Berry? And then
Yeah.
get into that. How's
Hey, what
that?
about Chuck
Yeah.
Berry?
Just say, what about Chuck Berry?
We're rolling.
What about
Yes,
that Chuck
pause it.
Berry?
I'm rolling.
So this can be for you too if you need that. And anytime you want, go.
Certainly one of the most influential rock and roll guitar players has been Chuck Berry.
Oh, Chuck Berry, yes, absolutely. Yes, very important. And his style was sort of based more on feel than technique, I think. It's very hard to not play a Chuck Berry riff sometimes. I think if you decided to do... oh, I dried up now. Sorry. What was I going to say?
Take 2 of
I wasn't rolling all along. No,
We
no.
have a...
your speed.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yes, I did.
And this is take 2 of shot 3. In 5, 4, 3, 2.
Chuck Berry.
Take your time, go slow.
Chuck Berry practically invented rock and roll guitar playing. He wrote the book that other guitarists have been stealing pages from ever since.
Nice. Pause it. Do you think you could and unpause? Take your time. Breathe. And whenever you're ready.
Chuck Berry practically invented rock and roll guitar playing. He wrote the book that other guitarists have been stealing pages from ever since.
Nice. You
That's
like?
nice. Yep, I like a lot.
Done with that?
Okay, roll. 5, then rotor, rooter. 3, 2,
Nice and slow because it's a long route, and it's a second button.
So we have speed.
British Blues, this is shot 4, this is take 1. And take your time. 4, 3,
The blues influence in England was even more widespread than in America, with John Mayall, Alexis Korner, and Peter Green, among the others, leading the way.
No, that's a bad script. This is
Yeah,
changes.
among,
Pause it.
yeah.
Rolling 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, speed.
This is British blues. Take 2, I believe. And 5, 4, 3.
The blues influence in England when it... The blues influence in England when... What's the matter?
It's just.
It's me. It's...
No, it isn't. The blues.
I keep saying wath.
First.
Wath even more... The blues influence in England was even more widespread than in America, with Eric Clapton, Peter Green, and Alexis Korner leading the way. The British blues boom erupted in the 60s, in the mid-60s, in the hands of genuine guitar heroes like Keith Richards, Pete Townsend, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page.
Yeah, it's nice. We're going to get there. Rest.
Rolling 5, 4, 3, 2.
I noticed your seconds are getting shorter today.
Speed.
Over the one. This is British blues. Take 3. In 5, 4.
The blues influence in England when it was even... The blues influence in England was even more widespread than in America, with John Mayall, Alexis Korner, and Peter Green leading the way. The British blues boom erupted in the mid-60s in the hands of genuine English guitar heroes like Keith Richards,
Go ahead.
Pete Townsend, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, and Eric Clapton.
I think we got it. You like
That was
that?
great.
Is the and Eric Clapton, will that
That's
fit?
fine.
Word?
Rolling 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, speed.
This is Intro to Steve Cropper. Take 1. Shot number 5. And 3.
It's ironic that one of the leading architects of 60s American soul music was a white guitarist from Memphis named Steve Cropper. Steve worked with Booker T and the MGs and co-authored classics like Green Onions, Dock of the Bay, In the Midnight Hour. And In the Midnight Hour, sorry. And again?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, Rob, just keep that. I like that. Still rolling. This is take 2. Take your time.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Is that good?
Yes.
It's ironic that one of the leading architects of 60s American soul music was a white guitarist from Memphis named Steve Cropper. Steve worked with Booker T and the MGs and co-authored classics like Green Onions, Dock of the Bay, and In the Midnight Hour. And in the late 70s, Steve anchored the Blues Brothers band.
I liked it. You like it?